So for this week on CyberSchool, we're covering kind of a different segment as we come in here, and we're going to specifically talk about SIP and Multicast, what they are, how to use them, and some different pitfalls that you can run into. And this will kind of be a series that will build on talking about specific protocols that you can utilize to use our products, where you encounter them, where they're best suited, and some issues that you might encounter as you're trying to use them. So first and foremost, SIP and multicast. What's that? Well, SIP, of course, is the kind of predominant driver for telecom in general. It's used by pretty much every single VoIP phone system now, or IP PBX. And multicast is, kind of a thing that's supported by more of the endpoint manufacturers and some of the actual IP PBX platform publishers, creators, what have you. But specifically SIP, or Session Initiation Protocol, is just a communication protocol, as is multicast. And they're both used to get some kind of media, in quotes. In our terms today is just going to be audio, but it can be used for just about anything out there, from point A to point B. And in multicast case, it's from point A to point B, C, D, E, F, and so on and so forth. They can hit a lot of different locations. But both of these options, really with just sticking with either one, either just SIP or multicast, if you only stick with one, you've got some unique strengths, but they both also come with some weaknesses. So there's really different applications for each one, and by mixing the two together, you really have a very strong VoIP phone system and VoIP paging capability and just overall notification system by utilizing both of these different protocols. So specifically SIP, and the easiest way to think about it, it's provided from a VoIP phone system or an IP PBX provider, and it's best used for one-to-one style communication. In the technical terms, John calls Sally, but it's really just from point A to point B, or you want to make a phone call to somebody, you're going to be using SIP. SIP is best for that. Whereas multicast is going to be best for mass notifications. So you need to get some kind of an alert or a message out to multiple devices simultaneously. Multicast is better for that. And there's some specific reasons that we'll get into as we carry on here, but that's kind of the basics of both SIP and multicast. So to go into SIP a little bit more in depth, again, it's predominantly going to be used with different phone systems or IP PBX providers. When you're going out and working with a specific platform, 3CX, RingCentral, AT&T Office at Hand, Zoom, Cisco, what have you, you're going to be using SIP predominantly. Again, it's kind of the industry standard. 99.9% of the telecom industry is using SIP now, just because it's the best communication protocol to go and set up these different phone calls. And it allows you the capability to actually dial phone numbers or extensions, where you can just go and say pick up your phone and dial extension 123 to call somebody, or what have you. You can actually dial a number in there, and that's all provided because of SIP. It gives you a lot of conveniences, and provides a lot of different methods for different notification capability in kind of that one-to-one style. The nice thing when you're dealing with SIP is it has kind of adapted to the times. When it was initially created, there was a single transport protocol, or a way of getting the actual SIP messages from point A to point B, from John to Sally. Well, now in the modern day, there's a whole bunch of different transport protocols that they can utilize, and SIP can use any of those. And that can provide a lot of cool capability and security when you're dealing with, kind of the industry standard of hosted platforms now. When, instead of having a local box that would be in your server room that's your phone system, now you just pay somebody and it's in the quote unquote cloud, whatever the heck that means. So it gives you that cool capability, and with the different transport protocols, you can secure your messages as they go out across the open internet, just so that way, nobody can actually spy on what you're talking about. And again, when you're dealing with SIP, it's best used for one-to-one style communication, but it can be used for paging in some circumstances where you want to go and get a notification out to more than one party. Say you want to get a notification out to, John, Jeff, and, Sally, or what have you. You want to get a message out to multiple people, and instead of making 3 individual phone calls, you can do that via SIP on specific platforms. Not everybody supports that. but it isn't always ideal when you're dealing with scale for paging, and that's where multicast really shines over SIP in that particular regard. But when dealing with SIP and really dealing with anything, there are some potential problems that you can run into with SIP. Um, One that's not really a problem, but a thing to be aware of is when you're dealing with SIP predominantly now, especially in the last couple years, as we've all kind of been dealing with the migration to hybrid working, working from home, what have you. Hosted providers have become the big norm in the industry, which means because the hosted providers are hosted quote unquote in the cloud, your SIP traffic, your communications, your calls have to go out across the open internet, which means, if I'm calling you from my house to your house, or what have you, at your office building, all of our phone conversations are going out across the open internet, which is normally pretty safe, but it has the possibility for somebody to go and monitor and listen to that traffic so they can find out what we're talking about. There's potential security flaws there. But then when you're just dealing with the traffic having to actually go out across the open internet, you're dealing with security actually at both locations, technically all three locations, because you have to deal with your local firewall, the firewall at whatever provider is providing you that service. Again, RingCentral, AT&T Office at Hand, Zoom, what have you. They have a firewall or a device called a session border controller that is way outside of the extent of today's conversation. And then the firewall at the recipient location, which can be complicated. Firewalls are generally one of the biggest things that we get in tech support, either both, for us or, for our technology partners, is just dealing with basic support questions related to firewalls and needing to open specific ports or whitelisting traffic from a specific IP address. And that gets really complicated. And one of the benefits of when you're dealing with SIP is, again, because of those other transport protocols that I mentioned, it gives you capabilities to kind of get around firewall issues. And that's by utilizing a communication protocol known as TCP, Transport Control Protocol, or TLS, Transport Layer Security, which gives you the capability to go and actually bypass some of the rules of the firewalls because of the style of the communication. And again, the reason why that works is way outside of the scope of this particular conversation and the session we're having today. That would take an hour to explain all the subtle differences and everything with that. But you can go and you can actually get through those firewalls a lot easier when you're dealing with SIP, but it's still a hurdle that you potentially have to get over. And then finally, when you're dealing with paging via SIP, it's possible and it's widely supported on a good portion and an expanding portion of different platforms out there, but it's not ideal in all situations. It has some different pitfalls, specifically just around the network bandwidth that's required for paging when you're dealing with SIP at scale because of how it works, where it's a one-to-one style call from me to you. And if I want to send it to me, to you, and three of your friends, that's 4 phone calls. And that can go and kind of bloat up a network where multicast does that a little bit better. So when we're dealing with paging via SIP, there's some things to consider. Of course, it's only going to be supported by some providers. Not everybody's going to support it. Of course, everybody that's using the RingCentral ecosystem or platform, RingCentral, Office at Hand, via Cloud Office, what have you, they're all going to support it, as does 3CX. The main downside to it is it's a lot more network intensive. Again, kind of like I was alluding to, SIP is, a one-to-one style call, meaning from me to you. And if we want to send that to multiple people, every single person that we add in there is an individual call and an individual stream of data, which is fine. Let's say, 5, 10, 20 people. But when you're dealing with 50, 60, 100 different, say, speakers at a school, that's a lot of connections, and that's going to eat up a lot of your network bandwidth and can be very intensive. So it's not really ideal for those particular situations, which means paging via SIP is really ideal for small to very small, medium-sized groups, not full medium-sized, but kind of small, medium, kind of that Goldilocks zone. But it really doesn't work at scale, and that's where multicast can really shine. So now we can talk a little bit more about multicast. And multicast is going to be known as, it's really a LAN or local area network specific communication protocol that you can use. And it's designed to get audio from point A to point B, C, D, and E without being very network intensive. And that's done by utilizing a couple of different methods to get it across that are kind of outside of the scope of this video. but it's very powerful protocol. But some of the limitations that you're dealing with multicast is it's not designed to go over the wide area network, basically the internet. It's designed to use locally in your network, wherever you're at, whether it's your home, your, business, your school, what have you. Multicast is designed for that scenario. It's not really designed to go across the open internet. You can make it work, but it's not really ideal, and that can create a whole bunch of pitfalls. So it's generally best practice to keep it isolated to a specific local area network. But the nice thing with multicast is it's kind of become an unofficial industry standard where the majority of providers, whether it's IP endpoints like what's manufactured by CyberData or your favorite brand of desk phone, for people that still use desk phones, it probably supports multicast. It's kind of widely supported without everybody coming together and saying, we are going to support multicast. They all kind of did, just because it's really easy to handle paging, because it's the best option out there today for paging more than one device simultaneously, just because of how the protocol works. But there are some pitfalls that you run into when you're dealing with multicast, because not every network plays very well with multicast, because there are some complex networking stuff that you have to deal with. So in generality, it's going to be fine to use multicast in most instances. Most of the equipment on your network is already going to be using multicast for various different protocols. It's used a lot in all different facets of networking and different device discovery, but it can be challenging in some instances just because of the nature of how multicast works. There are specific switch brands that you can work with that can be very painful to set up multicast with. And some network routing rules to allow traffic to, say, jump between different VLANs or actual physical LANs, again, physical area networks. It can be challenging to get get the multicast from, say, one VLAN to another. So it can be challenging to set up multicast. In some scenarios, most of the time, it's going to work out of the box. And there's very specific scenarios where multicast might not be enabled or might not be useful in some scenarios, again, just because of the nature of how multicast works that is outside of the scope of today's video. We've already got hour-long videos on our YouTube channel that explains and talks about multicast. So finally, just talking about SIP and multicast together. They're really two different communication protocols that define and have become the greater part of the telecom industry. Every single network telecom provider that you're going to work with today supports SIP, and every single endpoint manufacturer that you work with is going to support multicast. So with the two, they really capitalize on the strength of each other and create the VoIP phone system that we all know and some of us love. Not everybody does. Some people just think it's a regular, it's a phone. I don't care, as long as I can call somebody, it works. But it's a really powerful system and provides the whole capability that we have today by capitalizing on the strengths and the weaknesses of both. And these two paired together, it's like chocolate and Reese's peanut butter. The two just work together.
Thank you for watching this edition of CyberSchool. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.